Miss Blaine.
Hi.
All right. So we're gonna go ahead and do your follow-up from the lesson that you taught last week.
Okay.
There were some really great things that I saw, and I really enjoy watching you teach. So I'm just gonna ask you a few questions, and we can kind of just work together and collaborate and see, what are some takeaways and what are some, victories that we found in the lesson. So for you, what do you think really worked in your lesson?
I think it really worked well to model for my kids, go through some explicit instruction with them, how to decode words and unknown words. And also when we were annotating in the text, modeling that worked really well.
Okay. And with that, you were definitely meeting the needs of your students, because I understand that they're third grade, and I know the group that you have tend to be on the lower scale.
Yes.
So I know a lot of decoding practices were very essential for that lesson.
Absolutely.
So, all right. What does the evidence from student work during the lesson suggest about students' progress toward mastering the standard? So I know the standard you have brought up when we last spoke was the informational text and looking at text structure. So what evidence did you find based on when you were teaching it if the students were on target with you?
Right. So in our lesson, we did a graphic organizer to kind of get a informal assessment of how well they understood text structure and to identify it and analyze it within the text. And they worked on it collaboratively in a group together. Based on how well they did, about, I guess, 75% of the class kind of showed a little mastery. The rest, they kind of needed more practice, more help. More prompting.
Okay.
But overall, the majority of them did well.
Yeah, they seemed like they were getting it. You had those few that, you kind of had to be over them and scaffold them a little better, and there's nothing wrong with that. So, what instructional practices move the students toward mastery of the standard? So I know one thing that I really enjoyed watching was that you use Nearpod, and I think that's a really good visual for them to, challenge them, but to also work together with you, because they have their computers and then they're looking up at your screen, seeing, okay, what are the next steps? What does the teacher require of us? Your explicit instruction was very clear, because the students understood exactly what needed to be done through your modeling, like you had mentioned before. So did you find any other instructional practices that were essential for them meeting that standard?
Just the scaffolding, really, because like you had mentioned, the group is really on the lower side, so, and they need that one-on-one, also one-on-one kind of stepping in during their independent time and, prompting them. That practice is really what helped push them toward their goal.
Definitely. So to kind of segue into keeping in mind that there were quite a few students that did struggle, and they are a repetitive strugel with certain concepts and everything. One thing that I would love for us to do is work more on like Kagan strategies.
Okay.
I know that is highly sought after, in schools and everything, and I think it's a really good practice to do. But giving the students the opportunity to take a hold of their learning, and to be able to collaborate with their peers, and not necessarily be that one student that's like, oh, I'm gonna let them do all the work. Like, it gives them all the opportunity, and that's something that we can look into for your class, to see if maybe that method will have them be a little more engaged and the understanding will be a little more clearer for them. So
yeah, I think that sounds like a good idea. And this group, I believe that they would have more of a voice in an agency, I guess. They'll have their student agency. in their classroom, take accountability, that'll help them. I believe that'll work for them.
Definitely, and I think they'll have fun with it too, because there's so many different styles you can use, you know, as far as the different platforms to choose from. And at this age, it's fun because they're, you know, they're old enough to be able to, you know, you give them direction and then they know what to do, as opposed to having like a primary grade where it's a little more hand-holding with that. So this is the perfect age to do like Kagan strategies for. So, but we can definitely speak at another time and discuss follow-up for Kagan to utilize in your classroom, and we'll just continue to monitor through observation. So, it's a great lesson. Thank you so much, Ms. Blaine. I appreciate it.
No problem.